I realized something was off the morning I found my coffee mug turned upside down in the sink with a note that said, "Wash your own stuff for once." It shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did, but it hit me like a slap. I stood there staring at it, feeling that familiar sting, the kind that shows up when someone decides you're an easy target. I rent a small duplex on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. I work long shifts at a hardware store, and most days I come home too tired to do more than heat dinner and watch whatever's on. My neighbor Melissa lives in the other half of the duplex. She's a daycare worker, always dramatic, always loud, but for the first year, we kept things polite. Morning, evening, the usual neighborly rhythm. That started changing around the time her sister moved in temporarily. Suddenly, there were extra cars blocking my spot, trash bags left beside my bin instead of her own, and people knocking on my door asking for things that had nothing to do with me. At first, I chalked it up to chaos. People get busy, people slip. But then came the comments. Little jabs about how I must love being single because no one has to put up with me, or how some folks don't mind living like bachelors forever. Every time she said something like that, she'd chuckle like we were sharing some cute inside joke. I never laughed. One afternoon, I came home to find her leaning against my side of the fence, arms crossed, telling her sister, "I barely contribute to the neighborhood." I don't even know what that means. I mow my own lawn, keep my space clean, mind my business. But there she was, spreading stories like I was some lazy freeloader. I tried talking to her once. Nothing confrontational, just a calm, "Hey, I've noticed a few comments lately. Is something wrong?" She gave me that smile people use when they think they're smarter than you. "Oh, come on," she said. "Don't be so sensitive." Funny how the people who dish out disrespect are always the first to accuse you of overreacting. The real shift happened when she started using my yard tools without asking. I kept them in a small shed behind my place. One day I walked out back and saw my rake leaning against her wall, caked with leaves, and my extension cord coiled on her patio table. When I knocked to ask about it, she rolled her eyes and said, "Relax, you weren't using it." That stuck with me. You weren't using it. Like my belongings were community property unless I physically guarded them. I tried letting it go. I really did. Life's stressful enough without picking fights over tools or parking spots. But the disrespect didn't fade. It grew like mold. The final straw of part one came on an ordinary Thursday. I got home, pulled into the driveway, and saw Melissa sitting on my porch steps with her feet kicked up like she owned the place. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your porch is way comfier than mine. Hope you don't mind." Something inside me tightened. Not anger exactly, but clarity, a stillness, a sense that this wasn't going to stop on its own. I walked inside, shut the door, and stood there in the quiet of my living room. That was the moment I knew this was no longer just annoying neighbor behavior. This was a pattern, and patterns can be broken. The next few weeks were like watching someone test a fence one picket at a time, seeing where it would give. Melissa seemed to push a little more every day, just to see if I'd react. It started with the mail. I noticed she'd started collecting both of our mail from the shared box to be helpful. Except half the time, my letters would show up bent, out of order, or already opened at the corner like someone had peeked. When I mentioned it, she laughed and said, "Please, you think your life is that interesting?" One Saturday morning, I stepped out to grab a package I'd been tracking for days, only to find the delivery note stuck to the door. Left with neighbor. I knocked on her side. She opened the door halfway, blocking the doorway with her body. "Yeah?" she asked. "I think a package of mine got left with you," I said. She sighed like I'd already inconvenienced her. "Oh, that. I brought it inside so porch pirates wouldn't grab it. You're welcome." She didn't move to grab it. After a solid 10 seconds of silence, I said, "Can I have it?" She rolled her eyes, turned around, and came back with the box tucked under her arm like it belonged to her. "You know," she said, passing it over, "most neighbors say thank you." I did say thank you. It didn't matter. From then on, the energy shifted from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. She started hosting these loud get-togethers on weeknights, people smoking right under my living room window, music thumping through the shared wall. When I'd ask if they could keep it down because I woke up early for work, she'd say, "It's not that late," even when it was nearly midnight. Then came the lies. One afternoon, I ran into our landlord, Mr. Peterson, in the driveway. He's an older guy, owns a few properties around town, but still does most of the basic repairs himself. Usually he's friendly. That day he looked hesitant. "Hey," he said, adjusting his cap. "Everything all right between you and Melissa?" I got that sinking feeling. "Far as I know," I said. "Why?" He shifted his weight. "She's mentioned you've been a bit difficult, complaining about noise that isn't happening, leaving trash in the yard, that kind of thing." I just stared at him. Because I don't throw parties. I take my trash out on schedule. I'm the one picking up stray cups from her late-night hangouts. I've never complained about noise unless it was past quiet hours, I said slowly. And I bag my own trash. Always. He studied my face for a second, then sighed. I figured there were two sides. Just keep it civil, okay? I don't want drama here. He got back in his truck and drove off, leaving me in the driveway with my jaw clenched. So she wasn't just taking advantage of me. She was rewriting the story. After that, little things started happening that were too targeted to be random. Dog poop would appear on my side of the lawn even though I don't own a dog. My trash bin would be mysteriously overstuffed with takeout bags I didn't buy. Twice I found my car boxed in by her friend's vehicle so tightly I had to knock and ask 3 different people to move before I could leave. Every time I brought something up, she'd twist it. "You always have a problem with something. Maybe you're just not cut out for shared spaces. It's not my fault you're so uptight." I stopped inviting people over because I didn't want to explain why my neighbor might glare at them or park behind them on purpose. I got quieter, more careful. I thought if I took up less space, she'd have less to push against. Instead, she took it as permission. The breaking point came on a Monday of all days. I'd just finished a 10-hour shift at the hardware store, my legs aching from standing and moving lumber for half the town. All I wanted was to shower and eat. When I pulled up, I saw a bright orange paper taped to my front door. At first, my heart sank. I thought eviction, but it was a noise disturbance warning from the city. Apparently, there had been a complaint about late-night yelling and hostile behavior coming from my side of the duplex. I just stood there on the porch, my hands shaking. I don't yell. I barely even talk loudly. Half the time, the TV is the loudest thing in my place. I went next door and knocked. Melissa opened the door with that innocent face she put on like makeup. "Oh, hey," she said. "Everything okay?" "Did you call the city on me?" I asked. Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" I held up the paper. She shrugged. "Well, someone had to. You've been stomping around and slamming doors at night. It scares me sometimes." I stared at her, stunned. "I work at 6 in the morning. I'm asleep by 10. "Maybe," she said, leaning on the doorframe. "You just don't realize how much space you take up." She smiled. That smile did it. Right there, on my own front step. With that warning notice crinkling in my hand, something inside me clicked over from frustration to a kind of cold calm. I realized she thought I wouldn't fight back because I'd been trying so hard to keep the peace. She mistook restraint for weakness. That was the night I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. I wasn't. I was being disrespected, lied about, and slowly pushed out of my own home. And I decided I was done. The shift in me wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some movie-style rage moment. It was quiet, like someone tightening a bolt until it finally locks into place. I wasn't going to blow up at her or start a war. That's what she'd expect. That's what she wanted. People like Melissa thrive on chaos because they get to twist the story while everyone else scrambles. So I chose something she didn't see coming. Patience. I spent the next week documenting everything. Not for revenge yet, but for clarity. Dates, times, photos. I kept a small notebook in my pocket during the day and updated it at night. I wanted a pattern. And boy, did one emerge fast. Trash in my bin every Tuesday and Friday. Noise past 11 p.m., 3 or 4 nights a week. Cars blocking my driveway mostly on weekends. Tools missing from my shed, returning only after I mentioned them aloud where she might hear through the wall. She wasn't sloppy, she was intentional. So I got intentional too. The first step was the shed. I replaced the old lock with a keypad one and moved the most borrowable items inside. The next morning I watched from my window as she walked around the shed twice, tugged the door, and frowned like she'd been personally robbed. Good. Second step, the driveway. I paid $60 for those little reflective markers people use to line flower beds. I placed them on the very edge of my side. Legal, neat, impossible to miss. The first night, her friends still parked partly on my side, knocked 3 of them over, and left. I took pictures and wrote down the plate number. That wasn't the real plan, though. That was just setting the stage. The real revenge started with Mr. Peterson, our landlord. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I asked if he could stop by whenever he had time. Saying something in the duplex felt off, and I wasn't sure if it was structural or just my imagination. It was vague enough to get him curious, but calm enough not to look like retaliation. He showed up 2 days later. I greeted him outside. "Glad you're here," I said. "I've noticed a few things I think you should see." He followed me around while I pointed out the tire marks tearing up my half of the yard, the chip in the siding from where someone had leaned a bike against it, the overflowing trash bags, always labeled from restaurants I never visited. I didn't accuse her. I didn't suggest she did anything. I just showed him the facts. Then I handed him my notebook. "I know you didn't ask for this," I said, "but I figured you should see what's been going on in case it affects the property." He flipped through it slowly. His jaw tightened a little. I didn't need to sell him anything. The evidence spoke for itself. Next, I showed him the notice from the city. He blinked at it. "You got this?" "Yeah," I said, "but I've never called anyone. Never had noise complaints. I've never even stayed up late enough to cause trouble." He stared at the paper for a long moment, then let out a quiet, irritated breath. Not at me, at her, but the part that really sealed the deal wasn't even mine. While we were talking, Melissa opened her door and said loudly to someone inside, "I swear, if he complains again, I'll make sure he gets another warning. Maybe then he'll finally move." Her voice carried across the driveway. Mr. Peterson heard it. She didn't see us behind the bushes near the walkway. He turned to me and gave a slow, understanding nod. "I'll handle this," he said. But I wasn't done. The second stage of my plan was about letting Melissa expose herself. I started being visibly careful about everything, closing doors gently, taking trash out during daylight, leaving for work quietly. I wanted her to run out of excuses. Sure enough, 3 nights later, a city officer came to my door about another noise complaint. Except this time, I had something Melissa didn't know about. A cheap little sound recorder plugged into the outlet in my living room. The officer listened to the last 12 hours of audio. Nothing but TV at a low volume and silence after 10 p.m. He frowned and wrote something down. "Looks like false reporting," he said. "Thanks for cooperating." Melissa must have seen him leave, because she peeked through her curtains like she expected applause. Instead, she got a formal warning. Not for me, for her. Mr. Peterson called me the next morning. "I had a long talk with Melissa last night," he said. "A very long talk. Don't worry, I'm addressing the issues." But I didn't leave it to him. Final stage. I compiled everything. The photos, the recordings, the timeline, the texts she'd sent me earlier in the year about borrowing things without permission. Then I filed a small nuisance complaint. Nothing dramatic, nothing harsh. Just factual, calm, organized. It triggered an inspection on both sides of the duplex. The inspector found her sister living there without being on the lease, found damage in her unit from parties, found trash buildup behind her patio. 3 violations. 3, all preventable, all chosen by her. She'd pushed and pushed, certain I wouldn't push back, certain the spotlight would never land on her. But I didn't need to fight. I just needed to step out of the way and let the truth walk forward. The fallout didn't hit all at once. It came in small, steady waves, like the universe wanted to make sure Melissa felt every inch of the mess she'd made. The first shift happened 3 days after the inspection. I heard firm knocking next door, Mr. Peterson's knock, and then muffled voices rising and falling. I wasn't eavesdropping, but the walls were thin, and her tone carried like usual. Defensive, high-pitched, accusatory. Then his voice, low, patient, tired in a way I hadn't heard before. By the end of the conversation, a door slammed hard enough to rattle my picture frames. About an hour later, she came outside, pacing the driveway while talking loudly into her phone. "He's acting like it's my fault," she snapped. "How was I supposed to know inspections were random? And now he's saying she can't stay unless she's on the lease. Like I have time for that paperwork." She paused, then added, "And I didn't do anything to the siding. That man next door probably damaged it himself." That line almost made me laugh. I was inside, microwaving leftovers. But even from the kitchen, I heard the wobble in her voice. She wasn't angry. She was scared. Within a week, the consequences started stacking. Her sister moved out first. Maybe she didn't want her name on anything. Maybe she just didn't want to be part of the drama. Either way, the extra car vanished from our driveway, and the late-night crowd thinned out fast. Then Mr. Peterson posted a notice on her door: repairs required, fines for unauthorized modifications, and a clear warning about further violations. She tried arguing with him on the lawn one afternoon, but he wasn't budging. He pointed to the clipboard, pointed to the inspector's notes, pointed to the lease. She eventually stomped inside, slamming the door hard enough that a loose porch board bounced. That evening, for the first time in months, the shared wall stayed quiet. But the biggest shift came when she tried one last move, one last attempt to flip the narrative. It was a Sunday morning. I was drinking coffee on my porch, enjoying the rare peace. She stepped outside, arms crossed, looking like someone who'd been practicing a speech in the mirror. "You know," she said, "you didn't have to go behind my back." I sipped my coffee. "Didn't go behind your back. You could have talked to me," she said, "instead of whatever that was." I looked at her calmly. "I did talk to you. Multiple times." She opened her mouth, closed it, then scoffed. "You're really something, you know that?" I didn't argue. I didn't rise to it. I just met her eyes with the same quiet she'd mistaken for weakness. That was the moment she realized the dynamic had changed. Not because she apologized, she didn't, but because she didn't have anywhere left to push. I'd taken away the places she could twist the story. I'd removed the shadows she used to operate in. She turned and went back inside without another word. 2 weeks later, her half of the duplex went up for rent. By the end of the month, she was gone. No dramatic farewell, no final insults. Just a moving truck, a few heavy slams of car doors, and the soft hum of an engine driving away. The quiet that settled afterward felt like oxygen. I remember standing on my porch the evening she left, the sun setting over the fence line. Everything still. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for the next problem. I wasn't scanning the yard for new damage or listening for her voice through the wall. I felt normal again, not triumphant, not smug, just steady. Looking back, the thing that surprises me most is how easy it would have been to keep letting it slide. How close I came to convincing myself I was making a big deal out of nothing. But disrespect grows in the spaces where you give it silence. The moment I stopped shrinking myself to keep the peace, her whole house of cards collapsed. Not because I attacked, but because I documented, prepared, and held my ground. She built her reputation on being loud. I reclaim mine by being consistent. The moral, if there is one, is simple. Someone can only walk over you if you stay where they're stepping.